Captain Forest here. In today's video, we're going to find out why Shadow versus Ryuko isn't close. If you guys are new to my channel, please leave a like, comment down below, and of course subscribe for further content. I'm going to go ahead and talk about Shadow, summarize some of his feats, his scaling, and then we're going to move on and talk about Ryuko's feats and her scaling, and then I'm going to conclude near the end of the video who loses more often than not. So let's begin. Shadow the Hedgehog debuted in Sonic Adventure 2, becoming one of Sonic's most powerful rivals and an important character in later Sonic games. Shadow's first encounter with Sonic was after Shadow had claimed one of the Chaos Emeralds. Due to Shadow resembling a lot of Sonic in terms of appearance, the military had mistaken Shadow for Sonic and was hot on Sonic's trail. Sonic attempts to engage in combat with Shadow as he charges towards him. Shadow invokes the power of the Chaos Emerald to use Chaos Control to blitz Sonic. Sonic at first mistook this as Shadow's own feat, however, he realized it was the use of the Chaos Emerald which warped space-time, allowing Shadow to teleport past Sonic at such speeds. The second encounter, which took place in the forest, where both Sonic and Shadow coincidentally cross paths. Both combatants engage in combat for the second time, with both showing signs of fatigue, and at this point neither Sonic or Shadow have the edge over each other, which would put them both equal to each other at the very least. Shadow and Sonic face off again in their final fight. This time there will be no excuses, no interruptions, no distractions. Both Sonic and Shadow go at it to the death. In the Sonic Adventure Battle 2 strategy guidebook, it states that Shadow's bark is worse than his bite, and another statement for Shadow stating that Sonic is willy but Shadow's shiftier, and that their arsenal are pretty much the same. Since Sonic at this point has his own Chaos Emerald thanks to Tails, it even outs the playing field, as the fight would come down to who was the better combatant. After the battle, Sonic appears in front of Knuckles, lying on the floor fatigued, showing that Sonic had to actually try in his fight with Shadow, and that Sonic did in fact defeat Shadow with high difficulty. We know this because if Sonic was killed, he wouldn't have shown up near the end of the hero ending, and both stories near the final boss would not have transpired. There are other arguments that suggest Sonic was fatigued due to him using the Chaos Emerald. However, it's been shown in many Sonic games to not be the case, as Sonic and Shadow have both used Chaos Control without showing any form of fatigue or tiredness. So more often than not, Sonic was tired due to his high caliber fight with Shadow. In Shadow the Hedgehog, there are 10 endings with 5 path choices. The true hero and the hero path is with Shadow siding with Gun and fighting against Black Doom. The true dark and the dark paths is with Shadow siding with Black Doom and waging war on the Earth and against the humans, Gun and Sonic. And the neutral path is Shadow abstaining from both dualities and going on his own path to collect all 7 Chaos Emeralds. 3 out of the 10 endings consist of Shadow battling Sonic and the Diabolon. Shadow in these endings successfully defeats Sonic and the Diabolon, and Sonic even states himself during the fight that playtime is over, meaning that Sonic was not holding back against Shadow anymore. So during this point forward, Shadow during this time period would scale above Sonic. Now let's talk about Sonic 06, go into a little bit of details with that messy game. So in Sonic 06, Silver the Hedgehog does battle with Sonic. We all know in their first encounter that Sonic got beaten and had no way to deal with Silver and his telekinesis. Amy had to jump in and stop him from dealing the final blow. You could make the argument that Sonic wasn't focused, was distracted, or simply off guard, since Sonic was trying to reason with Silver, as it stated in the guidebook that Sonic didn't necessarily want to fight Silver. Now in their second fight, Sonic had his back to Silver due to his concern for Elise's safety more than the fight itself, so that could affect Sonic's combat efficiency. But at this point, it's pretty clear that Silver was dominating Sonic, but again, if we take the statement and the interaction between the hedgehogs, this would be chalked up to Sonic holding back. Now afterwards we see Shadow jump in to take Sonic's place so Sonic can go after Elise when she gets captured again by Eggman. Shadow and Silver both go at it and are relative due to both sides showing signs of fatigue and effort, and are simply at an impasse at this point before the Chaos Emeralds were used to take down Silver. There is also a statement which states that only the heroic hedgehog has the power and strength to defeat the fires and banish the living flame forever, referring to Sonic, and that Sonic played a very integral role in defeating Solaris. However, both Silver and Shadow were also integral for aiding Sonic in defeating Solaris. There are arguments that can be made for those sides, and depending on what interpretation you pick, either Sonic or Shadow would edge out, or both are still relative at this point. Now for their super form, at this point in time they would be equal due to them gaining the same respective amps from their forms, and at that time base to base Sonic is still faster, but Shadow still downscales from Sonic's speed. We know this due to Silver's assessment from his encounters with both hedgehogs. Now that's going to conclude Sonic 06. I'm going to move over and talk about Sonic Forces. There is a scene in Sonic Forces where Sonic confronts a clone of Shadow. Sonic didn't know it was a clone at first. The clone then proceeds to charge in and attack Sonic. Sonic puts his hands up to block the oncoming attack, in which the clone was swiftly defeated by the real Shadow that appears out of nowhere to stop it. We can interpret this as Sonic thinking that Shadow's a threat and could hurt him. It would be silly to say otherwise, because if Sonic thought Shadow was inferior to him, Sonic would have used his speed to outmaneuver and attack Shadow. Now there's a way to indicate that Shadow grew stronger throughout Sonic Forces. Now there was a 6-month gap after Shadow laid the smackdown on base Infinite. The clones that Infinite makes are stated to be perfect to the originals, and the fact that Shadow was able to one-shot his clone would show a huge gap between the two. So Shadow at this point would be on Sonic's level to some degree. This is very impressive for Shadow because Infinite created a null space, which is a 4D infinite realm, and Sonic also broke out of the dimension with pure speed with the help of the rookie/avatar. So base Sonic scales to infinite, and Shadow would also scale to this feat too. So that's going to round up all of those feats for Sonic and Shadow. Pretty good scaling right here. Also, there are some finite AP levels you could use. There's some old stuff from back in Sonic Adventures Battle 2. There's a planetary, large planetary calc, planetary plus calc. There's also Sonic Battle with the infamous final egg blaster, which I think that was calced around multi-solar system. If you guys would like calcs, I will leave them in the description, but I will leave the annotations near the end of the video. So I think it's time we go over speed for Shadow now, folks. Shadow would scale to some of Sonic's speed feats. Sonic is also above the likes of Gamma, who can avoid Beta's laser beams, which was calced around the 5 times speed of light, aka FTL. Now there are some higher finite speed feats to go over. Metal Sonic travels an interstellar distance while damaged. Eggman shows the distance that Metal Sonic had to travel to. This feat was also calced around the 721 to 1161 times the speed of light, aka MFTL to MFTL plus. Inverse wise, Sonic scales to this due to him being above Metal Sonic, and Sonic has shown many times to defeat Metal Sonic, and Shadow has also defeated Metal Sonic 2 in the IDW comics, which also canon to the games, so the scaling makes sense. Now, we can also use some higher finite speed feats as well. There was a feat in Sonic Advance 3 that Super Sonic performs, where Super Sonic flew to the nebula in 6 seconds. This was calced around the 7 billion times the speed of light, aka MFTL plus. Eggman also scales to this, as he was present during the battle, and he's able to keep up with Super Sonic's movements inside his Eggmobile. Now base Sonic himself has surpassed those past previous feats of Super Sonic back then, and his base would scale to this. It's shown that Sonic can keep up with Eggman's Eggmobile in base form as well as other characters, so you can simply backscale this feat to other characters, and Shadow is one of them, and his super form would also scale to this too. Now Shadow's super form would also scale to this feat where Solaris spreads his light across the universe and all other branching timelines, which was calced around the 77 quadrillion times the speed of light, aka MFTL plus, as a low end. But due to the context of this feat is far faster than any finite speed feat, so Super Shadow's form would easily scale to the infinite to immeasurable speed ranges. That's going to round up stats for Shadow. I'm going to go ahead and bounce over and talk about hexes and abilities. Shadow possesses an assortment of hexes. His main go-to is his chaos power. We know many abilities such as chaos spears, where Shadow casts down and throws sharp beams of light at his opponents to pierce them. The spears also stick to the ground, and he can also charge up a big spear of energy to launch at the opponent for a devastating result, and he can also throw his spears backwards. Chaos Blast is an ability where Shadow channels his anger to release a giant widespread blast of energy to take out multiple foes. In his super form, the blast is even more devastating. Shadow can enter into an enhanced form called Chaos Boost. This form further increases his powers and abilities, such as turning his chaos spears into lances which explode upon impact, and by entering this state he was able to remove Mephiles from his shadow. The Chaos Snap is an ability that allows him to teleport to short distances and around his opponent. And Chaos Magic, by snapping his fingers, Shadow summons a rift that damages anyone nearby. Chaos Burst, Shadow hides away in an area of distorted space, and when he reappears, Shadow emits a small area of effect that damages anyone nearby. Roaming Chaos, Shadow throws an orb past the opponent, and the orb comes back to hit his unexpected opponent to get him off guard. When Shadow's in possession of a Chaos Emerald, he uses it to further increase the power and effectiveness of his Chaos abilities. He can use the Chaos Control to teleport, which the technique is stated to distort space and time while doing so, and he can also stop time with it, and he can also blind his opponents when he teleports too. Shadow wears 4 inhibitor rings, which help him to control his power. When he takes them off, he unleashes a surge of his true power, allowing him to steamroll his opponents. Shadow can also tap into his super form by using the power of all 7 Chaos Emeralds. He achieves this form, which greatly increases his stats, Chaos powers, and it also gives him invincibility. As a hedgehog, Shadow shares many traits like Sonic. He can perform the homing attack. An interesting thing about the homing attack is that it's stated in the Sonic 06 official guidebook that the user of the homing attack is described to instinctively attack the weak spot of an opponent. He can also spin dash by curling into a ball, and then he can also propel himself at such speeds. That's going to wrap up Shadow. Let's talk about some of Ryuko's feats that she's demonstrated throughout her own series. So Ryuko has some lower end feats and calcs, such as Ryuko's own raw attack potency, causing massive shockwaves in her fight with Satsuki, which was calced around the large town level ranges of AP. Ryuko's higher end showings comes from the time when Ryuko and the SS Naked Sun were able to pierce through the life fibers. This feat in question was calced around the continent levels of AP. And lastly, another feat that was performed by Ryuko while she was in her Kizaragi form was when she was flying from Earth to space and she blasts a hole through a layer of life fibers. This feat was calced around the 658.72 exatons of TNT, aka small planet level. Credits to Deathbattle and their research team for displaying this calc. This is going to conclude the AP section. I'm now going to move on to speed very briefly. So Ryuko's speed feat comes from very early on in the Kill la Kill series, where she was able to slice through 220 tennis balls at such speeds, and the speed required to do something at that caliber that would clock around the Mach 4528, aka massively hypersonic plus, which is very impressive. That's going to wrap up Ryuko's stats. Let's talk about her abilities and other assets that she brings to the table. Ryuko's Kamui, called Senketsu, is a uniform that is made of 100% life fibers. Senketsu can absorb other life fibers to increase its power to gain new abilities. Senketsu can transform into different modes, such as the Senji form, Senpu form, and when both modes are combined, it adds more versatility. This form allows her to pretty much erect rocket turbines and sharp spikes. However, Ryuko must be careful when she uses the forms, as it requires Ryuko's own blood to maintain and keep the suit fueled. If Senketsu loses control and Ryuko becomes emotionally unstable, she will enter into a berserker state. Ryuko also has another form called Kizaraki. This form is incredibly more powerful, but requires more of Ryuko's blood. While Ryuko is wearing Senketsu, it grants her incredible fast healing factor. She's shown to regenerate from being impaled, sliced in half, and has survived even having her heart ripped out. Her regeneration is so fast that Ryuko completely heals from her injuries before the attack has even finished inflicting harm to her body, which is absolutely insane. Really good regenerative abilities. Now, the strongest aspect of Ryuko is with her scissor blades. That's right folks, Ryuko comes equipped with her massive scissor blades, aka her rending scissor blades, which have unique functions and modes, such as decapitation mode, where the scissor blades extend, giving Ryuko incredible reach. The aluminum mode makes the scissors become astronomically huge in size, which can eclipse even the entire Earth due to its incredible size, giving her a massive range advantage as she can cut down and strike foes from afar. So that's going to wrap up all of Ryuko's abilities, her weapons and her stats and all that good jazz. I'm going to go ahead and give my thoughts on who I think wins more often than not in a cross-verse situation. Now, looking at both these combatants and their AP, pretty safe to say that Shadow takes this more often than not. Shadow easily has universal plus levels of AP, even if we use finite levels of AP. Sonic First has easily shown some easily multi-solar system stuff, solar system AP, there's some dwarf star calcs, there's some large planetary feats. So Shadow, even if we downplay Shadow's AP, it'd still be enough to one-shot. The difference is that big, so Shadow would just take victory more often than not when it comes down to AP. Speed, Shadow blitzes, his FTL, MFTL, or his finite feats. If you include Super Shadow, he's absolutely going to blitz Ryuko, no difficulty. In fact, he doesn't even need a super form to deal with Ryuko. Shadow also out-haxes Ryuko. He has his Chaos Control, his Chaos powers, could BFR her away, freeze time, Chaos Blast. Now, you could make the argument, what about her regen? Wouldn't her regen be able to withstand such force? No. Since the AP gap is so big, and since it's a widespread attack, her whole body is going to be engulfed by the massive wave of Chaos Blast, and she won't be able to heal in time, especially since the strength gap is that big. So Shadow would literally just vaporize her before she'd have time to regen. He'd be way too fast, he'd blitz the regen, the attack is just way too prominent, and Shadow has the necessary means to do so. So more often than not, gotta give it to Shadow. Way too fast, way too strong, better stats, better feats, way too haxy. He would pretty much play with Ryuko all day. Her scissor blades wouldn't be able to do anything. Ryuko's whole wing cons just won't be very useful, and even in equal stats, Shadow just completely just bullies with haxes, and he just stop time, Chaos Control, Chaos Blast, just completely wipe her out. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. Let me know your thoughts on the comment section. Who do you think wins more often than not in a crossfire situation? But yes, it's been real. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.